He thought it was over. He thought the moment Do-hyun's intermediary sent that message, the moment the deal was accepted and the old man retreated into whatever shadow he had crawled out of, that the worst of it was behind them. He thought he could exhale. He thought he could allow himself this one thing, this one person, without the world trying to take her from him. John Siwon had been wrong before. He was rarely wrong twice about the same thing. He had never been wrong about Ria. If you are watching this for the first time, go back and watch part 1 first because what is coming will not make sense without it. And if you already watched part 1, hit that subscribe button right now because part 2 is about to destroy you in the best possible way. Let's go. Ria's full name was Ria Seong. She had been born inside the syndicate the way some people are born into religion. Not chosen. Just absorbed. Her father had been one of John Siwon's father's most loyal soldiers. Her mother had been a woman who understood the life and said nothing and endured everything. Ria had grown up watching power move through rooms and deciding very early that she would be the one holding it someday. She was brilliant. She was patient. She was the kind of dangerous that takes years to reveal itself because it is so perfectly disguised as something else entirely. She had loved Siwon the way you love something you have decided belongs to you. Not with warmth. With ownership. She had watched him grow from a cold, quiet boy navigating his father's brutal world into the most powerful man and soul, and she had told herself the whole time that she was part of that story. That when he finally took the throne she would be standing beside him. He had looked through her like she was glass. Not cruelly. Not deliberately. That was almost worse. He had simply never seen her as a possibility. She had never registered. And when you build an entire identity around a person who does not know you exist in that way, the collapse of that identity does not make you sad. It makes you surgical. For 3 months she had watched from a careful distance while Siwon walked around his office like a different person. While Juno smiled too much. While a girl from Lagos with warm dark eyes and natural hair and absolutely no understanding of what world she had walked into made John Siwon put his hand over hers in a rain-dark office like she was something sacred. Ria had watched all of it. And she had planned. The photograph she held in the final frame of their story was not a surveillance photo this time. It was something far more useful. It was a document. 12 pages, printed clean, detailing every move Siwon had made in the past 3 months. Every shell company he had unwound. Every syndicate revenue stream he had cut. Every contact he had made with the 2 prosecutors whose names Zuri had mentioned in the restaurant as leverage against Do-hyun. Ria had been inside the operation the whole time. Not visibly. Not in any way that could be traced back to her. But she had a contact inside Juno's logistics team, a man named Woo Chang-sik who owed her a debt that predated the current regime and had been paying it in information for 8 months. She knew the plan. She knew how close it was to completion. She knew that if Siwon succeeded the syndicate as it existed would be finished and everyone who had built their power inside it, including her, would have nothing. She was not going to have nothing. She picked up her phone and made a call to a number that was not saved under any name. It rang twice. A man answered. His name was not important yet. What was important was what he represented. A faction of the syndicate that Siwon did not know existed. Splinter cells that had been forming quietly for 2 years in response to exactly what Siwon was doing. Men who had watched their CEO dismantle their world piece by piece and had decided they were done waiting for him to finish. "It's time," Ria said. The man on the other end said, "How long do we have?" "He's 6 weeks from completion," she said. "We move in 4. She hung up. In another part of Seoul, Zuri was asleep in Siwon's apartment for the first time. Not planned. She had fallen asleep on his couch at 1 in the morning while they were going through updated financial projections, and he had looked at her for a long moment and then gone to get a blanket and placed it over her with the careful deliberate movements of a man doing something completely new to him and finding it terrifying and necessary in equal measure. He sat in the chair across from her and watched her sleep and thought about 6 weeks. 6 weeks and it would be done. 6 weeks and he could stand in the light he had been building toward for 7 years. 6 weeks and he could look at this woman and not feel the weight of everything he still was pressing down on what he was trying to become. He thought about telling her. About the timeline. About how close they were. He decided to let her sleep. It was the wrong decision, as decisions made out of protectiveness often are. The next morning Zuri woke up on a couch that was more expensive than her monthly rent to find a note on the coffee table that said simply, "Breakfast is in the kitchen. I went to the office early. The coffee is better than it used to be. Argue with me about the Nakamoto account when you arrive." She stared at the note for a long moment. Then she pressed it against her chest and looked at the ceiling of his apartment with an expression that she was very glad no one was there to see. She arrived at the office 40 minutes later and the first person she saw was Juno, who handed her a coffee and said, "He got here at 5:30. He reorganized the entire third subsidiary structure. He also bought new coffee beans. I need you to tell him the coffee is good even if it isn't because I cannot have another conversation about coffee methodology at 5:30 in the morning." She laughed. It was the uncomplicated kind of laugh, the kind she had not realized she had stopped doing until she started again. "How close are we really?" Juno's expression shifted. Went serious in the way it did when the weight of what they were actually doing settled back into the room. 6 weeks. Maybe 5 if the Busan account releases on schedule. He looked at her carefully. "He hasn't told you the timeline." "No. He will." Juno paused. "He's not keeping it from you. He's keeping it from himself. If he says it out loud it becomes something that can be taken away." She understood that perfectly. She understood it because she had spent her whole life not saying the big dreams out loud for exactly the same reason. She looked at Juno and felt the particular warmth of being known by someone who pays attention. "Thank you for telling me." "Don't tell him I told you," Juno said. "He'll make me file reports manually for a month." She was still smiling when she pushed open the door to the analysis room and found Saiwan already there, standing at her desk looking at the Nakamoto account on her screen with the focused expression of a man who has identified a problem and is deciding how to feel about it. He looked up when she came in. Something moved across his face. Brief. Unguarded. The expression of a man who looked at someone and felt the specific relief of them being in the room. He controlled it quickly. Not quickly enough. "The third column on the Nakamoto file," he said. "The timing sequence is off." "Good morning to you too," she said. "Good morning." He said it like it surprised him slightly that he meant it. "The timing sequence is off." She set her bag down and came around to look at the screen. Close. Close in the way they had stopped pretending was accidental. She looked at the column. He was right. "I see it." She pulled out her chair and sat down. Also the coffee this morning was genuinely better. He looked at her. "I know. You're not going to say thank you. I'm choosing to accept that as baseline acknowledgement of improvement." She looked at him sideways. "That might be the least gracious thing you've said to me." "I'm working on grace," he said. "I'm better at coffee." She turned back to the screen before he could see the full extent of what his face did to her when he was like this. Unguarded. Almost funny. Almost soft. The man underneath the institution. 6 weeks, she said. He went very still. "Juno told you." "Juno told me." She looked at the screen. "You should have told me." A pause. "Not long." "Yes." "Say it out loud, Saiwan." Another pause. "Longer this time." She heard him exhale slowly. 6 weeks and it's finished. 5 if Busan clears on schedule. He paused. 6 weeks and I can be something other than what I've been. She turned to look at him. He was looking at the window. The Seoul morning was gray and clean outside. "You're already something other than what you've been," she said. "You have been for a while. You just keep forgetting to notice." He looked at her. The dark water eyes doing something complicated and warm. "You are extraordinarily inconvenient," he said. I know, she said. Get used to it. He pulled up a chair beside her. Not across. Beside. The way it always was now. The way it had become theirs without either of them deciding it. They worked in the good silence, and outside Seoul went about its morning, and neither of them knew that 4 weeks was what they actually had. Not 6. 4. The first sign that something was wrong came from Juno at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. He called Siwon on the private line, and his voice had the specific quality it only had when something was very wrong, and he was working hard not to sound like it was. Changsik didn't show up for the Busan handoff, he said. Siwon was quiet. How long? 6 hours. He's not answering any contact. His apartment is empty. Not packed, just empty. Like he left in the middle of something. Pull everything he's had access to in the past 8 months, Siwon said. His voice had shifted. The warmth was gone. The institution was back, cold and precise and lethal. Everything. Cross-reference with every meeting, every file transfer, every. Already running, Juno said. Siwon. A pause. He had access to the full timeline. The silence that followed lasted 4 seconds. Zuri, sitting beside him, watched his face do something she had never seen it do. Not fear. Siwon did not do fear. But something adjacent to it. Something that understood the specific horror of 7 years of careful work being exposed to the wrong people. Get everyone to secondary positions, Siwon said. Tonight. And find out who Changsik was reporting to. He hung up. He looked at Zuri. She was already looking at him. Tell me. He told her. All of it. The leak. The timeline exposure. The fact that whoever had Changsik now knew exactly how close they were and exactly what it would cost them if Siwon finished what he started. She listened without interrupting, the way she always listened, completely, and with the part of her brain that was always 3 steps ahead running quietly behind her eyes. When he finished, she said, Changsik has been in Juno's logistics team for how long? 8 months. When did the syndicate splinter cell start forming? He looked at her. How do you know about the splinter cells? I traced 3 anomalous account movements 6 weeks ago that didn't connect to Do-hyen's structure or yours. I flagged them in my personal notes but didn't escalate because I wasn't certain. She was already pulling up her laptop. I'm certain now. He watched her open files and cross-reference data with the focused efficiency of someone who had been quietly carrying a piece of the puzzle without knowing it was a piece. Zuri. I know. She was typing rapidly. I should have escalated it. That's not what I was going to say. She stopped typing. Looked at him. I was going to say thank you, he said quietly. She looked at him for a moment. Then turned back to the screen. Save it for when this is over. She pulled up the anomalous accounts. Look at the timing. These movements started 8 months ago, exactly when Changsik joined Juno's team. Whoever is running this has been building for a long time. Siwon leaned over to look at the screen. Close. His jaw was tight. His eyes moving rapidly across the data. And then he stopped. And Zuri felt him go still in the way that meant he had seen something. The originating account, he said. She looked at where he was pointing. A shell company. 3 layers deep. Routed through a subsidiary that had been dissolved 4 months ago but whose transaction history was still traceable if you knew what you were looking for. She traced it back. 1 layer. 2 layers. 3. The name at the origin was not a company name. It was a personal account. Registered to Seong Ria. The silence in the room was the kind that changes things. You know her, Zuri said. It was not a question. She could see it in the way he had gone completely motionless. Yes, he said. Who is she? He was quiet for a moment. Someone I should have dealt with a long time ago. Someone I thought was a peripheral risk. His jaw tightened. I underestimated her. She's been inside your operation. For 8 months. Yes. Zuri looked at the account on the screen. At the careful, patient architecture of a plan that had been running quietly underneath everything they were building. 8 months of intelligence. 8 months of access. 8 months of a woman who had decided that if she could not have the man, she could at the very minimum destroy everything he was trying to build. She's not working alone, Zuri said. The splinter cells. She's their architect. She gave them the intelligence and they gave her the firepower. She looked at Siwon. She's been waiting for the moment you thought it was safe. For weeks before completion, he said. Almost to himself. She waited until I had something to lose. The words landed in the room with specific weight. They both understood what they meant. Ria had waited until Zuri existed in Siwon's life before she moved. Because the most devastating weapon against a man who fears nothing is a person he cannot afford to lose. This is where I need you to hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me if you saw Ria coming, because the next part of this story is going to shake everything. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we are just getting started. Juno found Changsik 48 hours later. He was alive. He was in a private medical facility outside Seoul that was not on any public registry, and he had clearly been persuaded to leave his post through means that left visible evidence on his face and less visible evidence on everything else. He was also, once Juno sat across from him in that facility with the specific patient expression that meant there were no good options left, surprisingly willing to talk. He had not been reporting to Ria directly. He had been reporting to the man on the phone. The man whose name was not important until now. His name was Park Tae-sung. 42 years old. Former syndicate enforcer turned independent operator. He had built the Splinter network over 2 years with Ria's intelligence and his own considerable resources, and he had been waiting for exactly this moment. The moment Siwon was close enough to finishing that stopping him would require something drastic. The moment Siwon had something personal enough to make him hesitate. He had not counted on Zuri being exactly who she was. Taesung's plan had 3 components. The first was the intelligence leak through Changsik, already executed. The second was a coordinated move against 3 of the key legitimate business nodes that Siwon had built to replace syndicate revenue, designed to collapse the legal structure and force Siwon back to the syndicate income to survive. The third was Zuri. Not to hurt her. Taesung was ruthless but not reckless. He understood that hurting her would make Siwon a specific kind of dangerous that nobody wanted to be near. Instead, his plan was to expose her. To take everything she knew about Siwon's operation, the financial forensics, the prosecutor contacts, the timeline, and make it public through the journalist she had mentioned in the restaurant. Not to help the prosecutors. To destroy the controlled nature of Siwon's exit. To force everything into the open before it was ready. To make the completion impossible. It was elegant. Zuri said so, out loud, in the war room when Juno laid it all out, and both men looked at her and she said, I can appreciate the architecture of something while wanting to dismantle it, and Siwon made a sound that in a different man would have been a laugh. He needs the journalist to run the story, Zuri said. Which means he needs to get the information to the journalist first. Which means there's a window. 3 days, Juno said. Maybe 4. After that the journalist publishes regardless. Then we finish in 3, Zuri said. Both men looked at her. We're 6 weeks out on the standard timeline, she said, already pulling up screens. But the standard timeline assumes we complete each subsidiary conversion sequentially. If we run them in parallel, the risk of error multiplies by a factor of, Siwon started. I know the risk, she said. I wrote the analysis. I also know we have 3 days and a journalist and a woman named Ria who has been building this play for 8 months, and I am not going to let her win. She looked at Siwon. Tell me I'm wrong about the parallel conversion. He looked at her. At the screens. At the architecture of what she was proposing. She watched him run the numbers in that precise, extraordinary mind of his. She watched him find the same thing she had found. The thing that was terrifying and possible in equal measure. You're not wrong, he said. Then let's finish it. What followed was the most intense 72 hours of all three of their lives. Zuri ran the financial conversions in parallel, tracking 6 simultaneous subsidiary transitions with the focus of someone dismantling a bomb while someone else is building one nearby. Juno coordinated the logistics and blocked Taesung's moves against the legitimate business nodes one by one, arriving exactly where he needed to be exactly when he needed to be there with the efficiency of a man who has been doing this his entire life. Siwon worked across all of it simultaneously, moving between Zuri's screens and Juno's operations, holding the entire architecture in his head, making decisions in seconds that other people would need hours for, the machine that he was built to be finally being used for something worth building. And on the second night, when Zuri had been awake for 31 hours and her eyes were doing things that eyes do at hour 31 and she made an error on the Taegu conversion that she caught herself but only barely, Siwon sat down beside her and took the keyboard from her hands gently and said, "Sleep. 2 hours. I have this." She looked at him. "You haven't slept either." "I'll sleep when it's finished." "That's not Zuri." He said her name the way he always said it. Like he had decided it was worth keeping and had not once reconsidered. 2 hours. The couch in my office. I will wake you when I need you. She looked at him for a long moment. At the exhaustion he was carrying so carefully. At the man who had spent 7 years building towards something and was now in the final hours of it, running on nothing but will and the specific kind of love that doesn't announce itself but simply shows up and stays. She went to sleep on his couch. He woke her in exactly 2 hours. On the morning of the third day, at 7:42 a.m., John Siwon sat at the head of a conference table on the 40th floor of KS Holdings, the same table where a girl had once spilled coffee on a $40 million contract and changed the entire direction of his life, and he signed the final conversion document. The last shell company dissolved. The last syndicate revenue stream replaced. The last piece of an empire built on fear transformed into something that could stand in daylight and answer for itself. It was done. Juno, sitting to his left, said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, 7 years. 7 years, Siwon agreed. Across the table, Zuri watched him set down his pen and she saw it happen. The thing she had been watching build for months. The armor didn't fall. It didn't crack. It simply became unnecessary. Like a structure that was load-bearing for years meeting the moment when the weight is finally, permanently lifted. His shoulders dropped a fraction. His jaw unclenched. His dark eyes, the color of deep water at night, looked up from the document and found her immediately across the table. She held his gaze and she did not say anything because nothing needed to be said. Taesung's journalist published nothing. There was nothing left to expose. The operation was complete and legal and already in the hands of the 2 prosecutors, delivered not as a scandal but as a voluntary disclosure with full documentation, the way Siwon had always planned it. Clean. Controlled. Finished. Taesung himself was picked up by the prosecutors 3 days later. The evidence trail was extensive and impeccable. Zuri had made sure of it. And Ria. Ria had disappeared. Not fled, exactly. Ria was not the kind of woman who fled. She had simply stepped back into whatever shadow she had emerged from with the patience of someone who understands that the most dangerous game is the long one. Juno's team tracked her to the edge of Seoul and then lost her somewhere in the direction of Busan and then lost her entirely. She was out there. She was not finished. They all knew it. But on a cold December morning 3 days after the final document was signed, Siwon took Zuri to a rooftop in Jongmyo that he had apparently owned for years and never used because he had never had a reason to stand on a rooftop and simply be a person. The Han River was visible in the distance. Seoul spread in every direction, vast and complex and full of things happening below the surface, a city that ran on layers the way he once had. He stood beside her and looked out at it and she looked at him looking at it and she understood something about this moment that she did not have words for yet and was in no hurry to find them. What happens now? She asked. He was quiet for a moment. The specific quiet of a man who has spent 7 years knowing exactly what came next and is standing for the first time in his adult life in open territory. I don't entirely know, he said. That's new. Is it frightening? He looked at her. Less than I expected. She smiled. Because of me? Yes, he said. Simply. Without qualification. The way he did everything when he had decided it was true. She leaned against the rooftop railing and looked at the city. I called my mother this morning. She wants to meet you. Something crossed his face. Something between terror and the specific warmth of being wanted by someone's people. That is a significant step. She already knows everything. She knew most of it before I told her. My mother is not a woman who is easily surprised. She paused. She said, and I am quoting directly, that any man who learns to make better coffee for one woman has already proven the most important thing. He was quiet for a moment. Then, would like to meet her. Zuri looked at him. The most feared man in Seoul, standing on a rooftop in December, wanting to meet her mother from Lagos. The man who had not looked at a woman in 7 years, looking at her like she was the only fixed point in a city that never stopped moving. She reached over and took his hand. He turned it over and held it the way he had that first night in the rain. Palm against palm. Like something he had decided was worth keeping and had not once reconsidered. Below them Seoul blazed and breathed and ran its complicated life. Above them the December sky was cold and clear and endless. And somewhere in Busan, in a hotel room with no name on the booking, Ria Seong sat at a window and looked at her phone and read the news about Taesung's arrest and the voluntary disclosure and the clean legal completion of everything Saiwon had spent 7 years building. She read it twice. Then she set the phone face down on the table. She was not angry. Anger was for people who had run out of options. She still had options. She had always had options. She had simply been playing the wrong game. She had been trying to stop him from finishing. She understood now that the finishing was not the vulnerability. The girl was the vulnerability. Not as a target. Not as a hostage. Ria had learned from Do Hyun's mistake. Direct moves against the girl only made Saiwon more dangerous. The vulnerability was something else. Something quieter. Something that required patience of a different kind. She picked up her phone again. Opened a different application. Looked at a file she had been building for 3 months, separate from everything she had given Taesung, kept entirely for herself. It contained one thing. A name. A name from Zuri's past. From Lagos. From a chapter of her life that she had never told Saiwon about because it was the one chapter she kept entirely for herself, locked away in the place where old wounds live. Ria looked at the name. She smiled the slow smile. And she began to plan. If you made it to the end of part 2, you are exactly the kind of viewer this channel exists for. Drop a comment right now telling me what you think Ria's next move is because I want to know if you can see it coming. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs a good rec today, and subscribe to this channel because part 3 is coming and I promise you the name in that file is going to change absolutely everything. I will see you in the next one.